These give rise to the motivation of bodhicitta, the thought I will establish all other beings limitless in number as the vast reaches of space at the level of perfect enlightenment, and in order to be able to do that, I will listen to this profound Dharma teaching and put it into practice. The teaching we're currently looking at is a torch lighting the way to freedom, complete instructions on the preliminary practices, the Kyabje de Rinpoche. This is comprised of three main parts: the virtuous beginning, middle, and end. We've covered the virtuous beginning, and we're now looking at the virtuous middle, the main part of the text. And this virtuous middle, the main body of the text, is comprised of two parts: how to follow a spiritual friend, the route of the path, and the main explanation of the stages for setting out on the path. We've covered the first and are looking at the second. This second part is comprised of two sections: the general preliminaries, which make one a fit vessel, and secondly, the specific preliminary practices for the yogas of the two phases. We've covered the first and are looking at the second. This second section, the specific preliminary practice for the yogas of the two phases, is comprised of two further subsections: the common preliminaries and the uncommon preliminaries. We're currently looking at the first, the common preliminaries, which is comprised of the four mind changings, reflecting on the difficulty of finding the freedoms and advantages, reflecting on death and impermanence, reflecting on the defects of cyclic existence, and reflecting on the unfailing law of actions, cause and effect. We've covered the first two, and we're currently looking at the second, reflecting on the defects of cyclic existence. This reflection is comprised of three further parts: reflecting generally on the sufferings of cyclic existence, reflecting specifically on the sufferings of the six classes of beings, and thirdly, reflecting particularly on the nature of the three kinds of suffering. We've covered the first, and we are currently looking at the second, reflecting specifically on the sufferings of the six classes of beings. Sorry, my mistake. We've covered the first three of these subsections. So the reflection on precious human life, death and impermanence, and the defects of psychic existence. And now we're looking at the fourth, reflecting on the unfailing law of actions, cause and effect, which itself is comprised of three further parts: reflecting generally on actions and their results, reflecting specifically on categories, and thirdly, a summary of key points, the four truths. So we've covered the first, and we're looking at the second, reflecting specifically on categories. So we discussed yesterday the nature of negative karma, the nature of misdeeds. Then we looked at the 10 non-virtuous actions. So what are those 10 non-virtuous actions? What is their nature? We went through all of these points in quite a lot of detail. So the text explains what the various causes of non-virtue are, the results, karmic results they lead to, the duration of those results, and so on. So we discussed those points yesterday, and we also looked at some anecdotes or stories that illustrate karmic ripening. So for instance, if you perform the negative karma of killing, of taking life, so let's take the example of killing, or indeed any action. Whatever the action might be, there are different ways in which that karma can be accumulated, even though it's the same deed, depending on the way the deed is performed, the different conditions that come together, the circumstances that surround it, the intensity of the action, and so on and so forth. All of these different factors will affect the karmic ripening of a deed, of the same, for instance, the same deed, like killing. For instance, when you're farming, say you're sowing barley seeds, right? Well, first of all, you need the seed, right? That's the principal cause, a barley seed. But there are different qualities of barley seed, right? You might have a very dried up seed, or a diseased seed. Even if you sow that seed, it's not going to bear a good harvest, right? But if you start out with a good barley seed and you sow that seed, and then you add the conditions of earth, water, warmth, and so on, well, then that seed is going to ripen into a plentiful harvest of good quality barley, right? And if these conditions of earth, meaning good soil, water, warmth, and so on, don't come together, well, then even if you have a good seed to begin with, it's not going to ripen well, right? It's not going to grow into an abundant harvest. And if these conditions of earth, water, and so on are not present at all, well, the seed will not ripen at all. It just won't sprout. So the same goes for all actions. So when we're performing virtuous karma or virtuous deeds, well, the strength of that virtuous deed depends on the strength of our motivation. And we spoke in previous days about virtue in accord with merit and virtue in accord with liberation, right? For instance, if you perform a virtuous deed, a virtuous action, but you do so with a mundane motivation that's just focused on short-term goals like gaining positive rebirth in samsara, um, and positive ripenings. Basically, if your motivation doesn't go beyond the material world, well, then even if you accumulate really significant virtuous deeds, perform very significant virtuous deeds, they will ripen in nothing more than, say, rebirth in the form and formless realms as a god in the form of form and formless realms. But if you perform those very same deeds, but motivated by bodhicitta, so if you infuse those actions with the motivation of bodhicitta, then those very same actions will become a cause for liberation from samsara and the attainment of enlightenment. So as taught in the words of my perfect teacher again and again, and all of the scriptures, just as Longchenpa says, the three excellences, the excellent preparation of bodhicitta and so on, are the most cherished factors for those desiring liberation and enlightenment. So if we perform the 10 virtuous deeds and we infuse those deeds with the three excellences of bodhicitta, the main part without reference point, and dedication, these three excellences, then those deeds will become causes for liberation and enlightenment. So through the strength of our motivation, those deeds, through the strength of our motivation, the noble qualities of our motivation, then those deeds will ripen in a much superior way. If we perform those very same deeds with a worldly motivation, they'll lead to nothing more than rebirth in the higher realms. But if infused with bodhicitta, with the threefold excellences, then they can lead us beyond samsara. And that is what we mean by merit or virtue in accord with liberation, merit that will lead to liberation. In short, any deed that is performed within the framework or infused with the three excellences is merit in accord with liberation. The first of these three excellences is the excellent preparation of bodhicitta, and the function of the excellent preparation of bodhicitta is to infuse all virtue with skillful means. Then we have the excellent main part, free of references or concepts, and the function of this is to make virtue immune to adversity. Then we have the excellent conclusion of dedication, and the function of that is to make virtue increase further and further. This is taught in the words of my perfect teacher, right? So if we do not infuse our virtue, embrace our virtue with bodhicitta, then there's the danger that the virtuous deeds we perform will become nothing more than merit in accord, than virtue in accord with merit, meaning virtuous deeds that lead simply to higher rebirth in samsara. So whatever virtuous deeds we perform, indeed whatever actions we perform, we should do so with bodhicitta, motivated by bodhicitta, which is to bring to mind the fact that all sentient beings, without exception, have been our mothers in the past. When they were our mothers, they showed us such extraordinary kindness. Every single one of these beings longs for nothing but happiness. They long for nothing but to be free of suffering, and yet because of their ignorance, they actually act in direct contradiction with their fundamental wish. They end up creating suffering for themselves and destroying their own chances of happiness. Seeing the plight of these beloved mother sentient beings who are needlessly suffering, we give rise to unbearable compassion and the wish, the determination to free them from suffering and establish them in the state of perfect enlightenment. This is bodhicitta, and it is with this motivation that we should perform any and all actions. Even the recitation of a single mani mantra should be motivated or driven by this mind of bodhicitta. Otherwise, if we perform actions with a worldly motivation, meaning just longing for short-term material benefits, name, recognition, material profit, and so on, well, then our actions are going to bring no real benefit, no real result. How is bodhicitta defined? Well, Maitreya and so on define it as a mind with two aspects, namely the aspect of compassion and wisdom. So it said, bodhicitta is the wish to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all other beings. So, simply speaking, that is bodhicitta, to be motivated to attain enlightenment. Why? For the benefit of all other beings. You might think, well, why do I need to attain enlightenment to help beings, and why can't sentient beings actually help themselves attain enlightenment? Well, that's just not really possible because sentient beings are so limited in their capacity just so limited. On the other hand, the state of enlightenment is so rich with skillful means, with methods and qualities. I can think of Buddha Shakyamuni, the way he was able to tame and influence so many beings, countless beings, each according to their own disposition, outlook, and so on. Like the way he tamed students who were dominated by attachment in one way, aversion in another way, ignorance in another way, and so on, each according to their specific needs. He was able to do that because he was enlightened, right? Because of the wealth of skillful means and insight he possessed as an enlightened being, endowed with the 10 powers, the 4 fearlessnesses, and so on. The entire array of enlightened qualities. Think also of the number of beings, right? Like just here we have 3,000 or 4,000 people gathered, but that's nothing compared to the population of Kathmandu Valley and the population of Nepal as a whole. There's several million people in this country, and then think of the wider global population. And that's just humans. Think of animals, hungry ghosts, hell beings. The number of beings in the lower realms surpasses that of humans. It's literally countless, an immeasurable amount of beings. Every single one of these beings, all of these countless beings, have been our kind mother in the past, not in this life, but in past lives. And so it is for their sake, in order to be able to benefit them, that we need to practice the Dharma and thereby attain enlightenment. This is our responsibility, this is our obligation, and until we attain enlightenment, well, we will not have the ability to bring significant benefit to beings. It's a bit like the way politicians speak, the way they claim to be motivated. They say, I'm going for the I'm putting myself up for the election as an MP or Prime Minister or what have you, because I want to be able to serve the people. I want to be able to serve my country and to improve the quality of life for people. Of course, most politicians don't follow through with what they say, but it's a similar kind of outlook, right? Because as an ordinary civilian, you really don't have the ability to do much for your fellow civilians, right? But if you attain the status of Prime Minister, well, then you have the whole of Parliament at your disposal, the military, everything. And you really do have the chance then to make some difference, right? Just think, for instance, of Trump, right, the US president, of the power he has to influence the world. Yeah, he's not might not be using it appropriately, but the point is that when you're in a position of power, you have an ability to make a difference, right? So this is just an example to make the principle easy to understand. But similarly, we are seeking to attain enlightenment. Why? So that we have the ability to benefit other beings in significant ways, because all of those beings have been our kind, loving parents in the past. So, in short, until we ourselves attain enlightenment, we do not have the ability to help other beings. Therefore, we give rise to bodhicitta. What is bodhicitta? It is the wish to attain enlightenment for the benefit of others. Motivated by bodhicitta, the bodhisattva practitioners following the vehicle of characteristics of the Mahayana path, they then accumulate merit and wisdom for 3 countless eons. So not just 1 or 2 eons, 3 countless eons, and then arrive at the level of enlightenment. That's for those of highest capacity, sharpest capacity. Those of middling capacities take 7 countless eons, and those of lesser capacity take 33 countless eons. For that long, they gather the accumulations of merit and wisdom, and finally attain perfect enlightenment. And having attained perfect enlightenment, then they can work for the benefit of beings, or rather, they can fulfill the benefit of beings. And if one follows the path of secret mantra, well, then things are a little easier in a sense. By utilizing the generation completion stages and so on, the practice of Dzogchen and the like, then one can make swifter progress and attain enlightenment in a shorter period of time. But in any case, one sets out with the motivation of bodhicitta, and by gathering the 2 accumulations, then attains enlightenment. So, of course, if we can attain enlightenment sooner, that's better, right? The sooner the better, for sure. But in any case, our motivation must be bodhicitta, the wish to attain perfect enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. That is what we mean by bodhicitta, the excellent preparation of bodhicitta. And to give rise to bodhicitta, we need to acknowledge the kindness of our parents. our parents in this on all lifetimes. But unfortunately, these days, well, it's a sign of the degenerate age, really. People don't even acknowledge the kindness of this life's parents, of their mother and father in this life. They don't treat them well, they have no gratitude, they don't take care of them. This is one of the worst things about the present age, and it's a very clear sign that we are in a degenerate age. This is really the root of the Dharma, the root of the spiritual path, acknowledging and recollecting one's parents' kindness, right? This is not just my idea, I'm not, or my creation. This is taught in the Buddhist scriptures itself, right? It's explained in detail in the words of my perfect teacher and so many other scriptures, like at Teacher's Lamp for the Path to Awakening, where he gives us a sevenfold pith instruction for generating bodhicitta, right? 7 meditations that are related as cause and effect. And Jiminipa's commentary to the Treasure of Precious Qualities, Chariot of the True Truths, he elaborates on this pith instruction for many pages. Such a precious and important instruction to help us give rise to bodhicitta, to help us strengthen our bodhicitta. So this needs to be our motivation, bodhicitta, our motivation in all we do. We're talking here about the 10 virtuous actions and the 10 non-virtuous actions, right? So bodhicitta needs to guide us here as well in accomplishing the 10 virtuous actions and abandoning the 10 non-virtuous actions. And if we lack bodhicitta, or we lack pure, strong bodhicitta, even if we cultivate, even if we perform the 10 non-virtuous deeds, because we're lacking a strong, pure motivation, namely the motivation of bodhicitta, those virtuous deeds will not lead to any really significant or powerful result. We use the example of a seed and the various conditions needed to help the seed sprout, right? We used that example previously. So, in exactly the same way, if we lack the let's say, the supportive circumstance of a bodhicitta, then no matter how much we perform virtuous actions, they're not going to bring about great results. So this is why it's so important that just like when farming, you need to nurture your seeds with water, with rich soil, with sun, and so on. Then just so we need to infuse all of our actions with bodhicitta. If we perform a single action with bodhicitta, then that action can bring about great result, a result that will just continue to increase, continue to bear fruit. So you might wonder, is this really the case? How can that really happen? Can bodhicitta really just bring about this exponential ripening of merit, ripening of benefit? Well, yes, it can. It really can. And we used the example previously of, I think, an ashok tree. One tiny seed grows into an enormous tree whose branches spread so far and wide, and then sow and give rise to even more trees it's basically similar to that. A small seed bears an enormous result in the case of the ashok tree, and so too when we perform actions infused by bodhicitta. So when performing the 10 virtuous deeds, we need to do so infused with bodhicitta, and this Patarumshi explains is infusing roots of virtue with skillful means. That is the function of the first excellence, the excellent preparation of bodhicitta. Then, in order to make our virtuous deeds, our accumulation of virtue, immune to adversity, then we need the excellent main part free of reference, we could say free of concepts. when we say adversity, we mean adverse circumstances like anger, which have the power to, thoughts of anger and so on, which have the power to destroy virtue, destroy enormous amounts of virtue. Just like in farming, for instance, you might work for months toiling your fields, plowing the fields, preparing the soil, sowing the seeds, watering the sprouts as they grow into a what looks like it's going to be a good harvest. And then before you're able to reap the harvest, then a hailstorm or something comes, or a fire, and destroys the crop. This happens, right? It happens up in our homeland, Humla, sometimes. And it's devastating for people, right? For the farmers. Often people break down in tears, and it is totally overwhelmed by the loss, right? You've invested so much time and energy, and then one fleeting circumstance comes along and destroys it all. So the excellent main part, um, for your reference point, protects us from this potential destruction of virtue, because that really can happen. You cultivate virtue, perform so much virtue in different ways, but then one day you get really angry, and that intense anger can destroy all of your virtue if you're not armored with the excellent main part, free of reference point. Bodhisattva Shantideva speaks about this in his Way of a Bodhisattva, right? He says, virtue accumulated over 1,000 eons can all be destroyed in a single instant by a moment of intense anger. Such is the destructive power of anger, of hatred. You could use the analogy of a forest fire, the terrible forest fires that surge through places like California these days, and in the course of several hours or days, just destroy thousands of acres of forest, of property, millions and billions of dollars of property. So a moment of anger can cause a similar, of course, much more significant destruction of enormous amounts of virtue accumulated over a long period of time. So what do we mean by the excellent main part free of reference point that can protect us from such destruction? It means to infuse our actions with non-conceptuality, to be free of the three conceptual spheres of subject, object, and action. And this is actually something very difficult, very challenging to really do properly or in actuality. So there are two ways to infuse our virtue, to free ourselves of the three conceptual spheres: relative way and an ultimate way. Relative way is to recall that all phenomena, everything that appears to us, is just a dream, just an illusion. It lacks reality. And the ultimate way is to actually have directly realized the lack of reality of all things. So let's take the example of generosity, of giving. The three conceptual spheres in this case would be the one giving, that's the subject, then the object, the one to whom we're giving, and then the action of giving. So we need to recognize that all of these three conceptual spheres, subject to object and action, lack reality. They are emptiness beyond construct, they are simplicity. Ultimately, they lack reality. They're just like an illusion and dream. Of course, to understand this and to embrace our actions with this understanding is pretty challenging. And Rinpoche quoted several lines from the introduction to the Middle Way by Chandrakirti that speak of these freedom from the three conceptual spheres. And indeed, the root stanzas of the Middle Way by Noble Nagarjuna is concerned entirely, also 27 chapters of that profound treatise that's concerned with the meaning of emptiness, reality beyond the three conceptual spheres. So this is something, profound emptiness, reality beyond the three conceptual spheres, is something, from one perspective, incredibly difficult to understand. That said, there is one approach of the pointing out instructions, where a qualified teacher can introduce a student directly and, in a sense, very easily, very quickly, immediately, to ultimate reality, to the true nature of mind. And if that person is a fit vessel, they'll be able to receive that pointing out instruction, recognize reality, and even if they've done no scriptural study, they have no formal education, it is possible that they will recognize reality. There is indeed this tradition, it is indeed a possibility. And this tradition of pointing out instructions is something very prized in the Nyingma tradition, right? But if one takes a more scholarly approach, the approach of investigation and analysis, and strives to gain an understanding in that way, well, then one needs to undergo extensive analysis, extensive study, contemplation. But that said, if you encounter a qualified teacher and receive a pointing out instruction from that teacher, if you receive that introduction with an open mind and recognize what's being pointed out and gain certainty in that, if you can trust that pointing out instruction, feel certainty in it, then from that perspective, it's really not difficult to come to understand that all phenomena are unreal, they're no more than illusions and dreams. It really is possible, actually, very quickly and simply to gain such an understanding. Of course, if we go into this in more detail, for instance, we talk about, okay, what is meant by, phenomena lacking reality, phenomena lacking establishment. According to the more scholarly approach or scriptural tradition, well, then there's an enormous amount of detail, profound and extensive detail to cover. There are the different types of reasonings presented in the Madhyamaka scriptures, like the reasoning of singularity, beyond singularity, and plurality, and so on and so forth. So if we approach this from the scriptural tradition or scriptural perspective, then it's very complex and detailed. There's a lot of detail and nuance to process. But from another perspective, the perspective of the pith instructions, which is the perspective we're taking here, right? It really is quite simple and straightforward. The three conceptual spheres, subject, object, and action. So, for example, giver, recipient, and giving. None of these exist, none of them are established. They are all just like a dream, just like an illusion. If you can understand this, comprehend this, well, that is the excellent main part, free of reference point. So, as I said, there are two ways to understand or apply the excellent main part, free of reference point, a relative way and an ultimate way. The relative way is actually very straightforward. It means to simply recall that all phenomena are just like dreams and illusions. They lack reality, and to kind of see all phenomena through this lens. The ultimate way is more challenging. It involves actually resting directly in equipoise and seeing directly the profound emptiness of all things. But the relative way, just perceiving phenomena through the lens, that is the understanding that all things are a dream and illusion, that is quite straightforward. And being quite straightforward, then that's the best approach. So there are many different types of samadhi, right? And as Pubachugu explains in his Prajnaparamita commentary, there are countless different types of samadhi, but they can all be condensed into three types: the hero-like samadhi, vajra-like samadhi, and illusory-like samadhi. The vajra-like samadhi refers to meditative equipoise, that is the unity of shamatha and vipassana, and the illusory samadhi refers to post-equipoise samadhi or post-equipoise outlook. And the hero-like samadhi is that which is practiced and cultivated on the bodhisattva bhumis, from the first bhumi to the second, the third, and so on. So for us, for say lay practitioners or more beginner practitioners, then the illusory samadhi is the approach for us to take. This is really easy to apply. It is simply to adopt this lens, this perspective that everything I see, everything I experience is just an illusion, it's just a dream. To infuse our perception with the understanding that everything is just an illusion. And in this way, whatever action we perform, like whatever virtue we perform, say generosity, we need to do so free of attachment, free of reification, free of the fixation on the reality of things. And we can do this by recalling the illusory nature of everything. If we can do this, perform all our virtue, perceive all things through the lens of illusoriness, understand that all things are just like illusions and dreams, then we are applying or we're fulfilling the second excellence of freedom from reference points, the main part, free from reference points. And this will guard our virtue from adversity. It will make our whatever virtue we accumulate immune to destruction from adverse circumstances like anger. So, as I've said, this approach of the illusory, like samadhi, is a much easier approach, something accessible and doable for most of us. So, that is the kind of best approach, the most advisable approach for us to take. Okay, how to do like how? Okay, if that's the approach we need to take, well, how to take it, how to apply it? Well, it means that we need to learn how to recall that whatever we're doing, uh, it is just an illusion, just a dream. Whether we're doing circumambulations, kora prostrations, what have you, we need to do that with the understanding that we, the agent, our action, and the object of our action, are all lacking reality. They're no more than a dream. And there's a wonderful story from Buddha's time that illustrates this, the story of the illusionist or the magician Vajra. I told this story at length when teaching the words of my perfect teacher a few years back. And this story is mentioned in the words of my perfect teacher itself, but many other scriptures. Of course, we find it, the original story, in the Kangyur, the collected words of the Buddha. It's such a wonderful story and a really precious illustration of these crucial points. And it illustrates wonderfully this principle of the second excellence. The second excellence of the main part without reference point and how it functions, how it makes all of our accumulation of virtue immune to adversity. A bit like you could say an example of putting your money in the bank. I know putting your money in the bank is not always totally safe, but presuming it is, anyway, it's just an example. So, to illustrate this point further, I'm going to tell the story of the illusionist Bhaja. So, he lived in Rajgir in ancient India at, during Buddha Shakyamuni's time. And there were many magicians, or we could say illusionists, at the time. And he was the most well known, the most skilled of them all. He was so famous. He'd been able to, with his illusions, with his magical projections, to let's say deceive or fool pretty much everyone in the land, from high to low. And his reputation had become very established. Bhadra thought, though, okay, my final hurdle is Buddha Shakyamuni. Buddha Shakyamuni is so highly revered. If I can only trick him with one of my illusions, then my fame will be kind of established in concrete. It'll be like the crowning jewel in my career. And so, excuse me, with this motivation, he went off to see Buddha Shakyamuni. And he said, Noble Buddha, I would like to invite you and your retinue, your 500 bhikshus, to come to receive lunch from me tomorrow. I would like to offer you all alms. Buddha accepted. Buddha said, okay. But what Bhaddra had thought, he thought, okay, I'm going to go and invite him to lunch. And if Buddha says yes, well, that's a clear sign that he doesn't have clairvoyance, that he can't read my mind. And because why would he agree to come to a lunch where he's going to be deceived? So when Buddha agreed and accepted the invitation, Bhaddra thought, it just shows this Buddha Shakyamuni is not clairvoyant after all. And so he went back, and the next morning he got up early and quickly got to work. He used all of his illusionist skills to conjure a beautiful marquee, decorated with flowers and so on, filled with beautiful seats, a throne for the Buddha, and other beautiful seats for his all of his monastic disciples. And on top of that, he emanated a feast of delicious food and drink, plates, dishes, and everything. So he created this extraordinary illusion, and all the local people seeing it were just totally overawed. They couldn't believe this beautiful spectacle, and they really fell for it, just the way that when we go to watch a movie, for instance, and we see all these vivid images on the screen in front of us, we get totally drawn in, right? We really react to what's going on in the movie because we're so caught up in it. We really we're invested in those appearances. We invest them with reality, right? And so actually, the powers of these illusionists like Bhaddra and so on much greater than the power of modern day film. Anyway, Bhaddra prepared everything, and then Buddha arrived. Just as promised, he arrived short of noon, followed by his many hundreds of disciples. And so Bhadra welcomed him, invited him into the marquee, requested him and all the others to take a seat. When everyone had taken a seat, then he had these waiters come out and serve the illusory food into their alms bowls. And Bhadra's plan was that just as Buddha raised the first mouthful of food to his mouth, he would click his fingers, and with his powers, he would dissolve the illusion. And then the food Buddha was holding in his hand would disappear, the seat he was sitting on would disappear, and he would fall to the dusty ground empty handed, and he would be totally embarrassed, humiliated in front of everyone. And Bhadra's prowess would be celebrated throughout the land. This was his plan. But when Bhadra clicked his fingers, nothing happened. Buddha just took that first mouthful, began chewing the illusory food as if it was real food. So did all of his disciples, and they ate their way through the entire meal. No matter how many times Bhadra clicked his fingers and did what, tried to dissolve his spell, he just couldn't. Everything now was just remaining steadfast in front of him as if it was real. He started to sweat, he went red, he didn't know what was going on. His plan was, things were not going according to plan. And Buddha was aware of everything that was going on, Bhadra's motivation and everything. And what he'd done is he'd used his own powers, his own ability, his own power of samadhi to bless Bhadra's illusion, so that it could actually be so that it could actually function, so that he and his disciples could eat the food and so on. He didn't react with anger and think, "How dare you try and humiliate me? I'm going to show you what's what." He didn't roll up his sleeves and so on and pick a fight with Bhadra. No, he simply blessed the illusion with his samadhi. He finished the meal, conducting himself tranquilly and calmly. And then, having finished the meal, well, as usual, it came time to dedicate the merit, right? The merit of the offering. Bhadra was so embarrassed, right? I mean, to dedicate the merit of something, well, you first of all need some merit, right? Like you need to have offered something, but Bhadra didn't offer anything. He just created this illusion with the intention to humiliate Buddha, and then he wasn't even able to do that. So he was so humiliated, so embarrassed as Buddha began to dedicate the merit. How did Buddha dedicate the merit? Well, he didn't scold Bhadra, he didn't criticize him, he didn't criticize him. He simply said, the giver, the gift, and the recipient, the giver, the act of giving, and the recipient, all of these lack reality, all are unreal. May all the merit from this concept-free, unreal act of giving be received by Bhadra, the illusionist. So Buddha was pointing out, you, Bhadra, the giver, you don't exist, you're not established. The recipient, me, Buddha, I also don't exist. And everything you gave, the food and banquet and so on, none of this exists. All of it lacks reality. All of it is emptiness beyond constructs. All of it is just an illusion dream. All of this illusory merit from this illusory act of giving, I dedicate to you, Bhadra. So if one dedicates merit in this way, one dedicates virtue in this way, infused with an understanding of non-conceptuality beyond the three conceptual spheres, then that merit becomes indestructible and inexhaustible. So it's vital then that we understand all phenomena are emptiness, all phenomena lack reality. And to do that, then we can train in perceiving all phenomena as illusions, as dreams. That's kind of the first step, the easiest way to approach this, and the first step. And if we can go deeper than that and come to see that all phenomena are profound emptiness beyond all complexity, beyond elaboration, well, even better, even more profound and powerful. So whatever you're doing, accumulating the Manya mantra, the Vajraguru mantra, or whatever it is, then you must do this, remembering that everything you perceive, all phenomena are just illusions and dreams, and in that way your practice will automatically become infused with the excellent main part, and the virtue you create will become indestructible. So let's apply this point of the excellent main part with that reference point, more specifically to the act of accumulating the Vajraguru mantra. So say that's your practice, right? You're accumulating the Vajraguru mantra. So you're visualizing Guru Rinpoche in front of you, focused on him. Then visualizing him, you are reciting the mantra, the Vajraguru mantra. One vital point here is to remember that Guru Rinpoche before you is inseparable with your own root Guru. So to visualize Guru Rinpoche as one with your root Guru. And the same goes for whatever deity you're practicing. Vajrasattva, Yeshe Tsogye, or so on. You must understand the deities taking the form of Yeshe Tsogye, or so on and so forth. But in essence, they are none other than my own teacher. With that visualization, that understanding, then you recite the mantra. As you recite the mantra, light rays radiate out, they emanate and present offerings, boundless, excellent offerings to the body, speech, and mind of Guru Rinpoche and the Enlightened Ones. And then they gather back and dissolve back into you with all of the blessings and siddhis, accomplishments of Guru Rinpoche and the Enlightened Ones. And you do all of this while remembering that everything, me, Guru Rinpoche, all of this is just an illusion, just a dream. In this way, your practice, your accumulation of virtue will be infused with the excellent main part, free of reference point. And what is the function of that? The function of that is to make your virtue indestructible, immune to adversity. And again, this very same point applies to whatever you're doing, whatever practice you're doing. A single circumambulation, a prostration, lighting a single butter lamp, or what have you. Otherwise, if you do your practice with a kind of concrete mindset, thinking, I'm here and I really exist, and over there is Guru Rinpoche and he really exists, and this action I'm performing, it really exists. If you reify everything and perceive it as solid and concrete, well then your the virtue accumulated will be much less, and also it will be very vulnerable. The slightest adverse circumstance will destroy it. You might think, well, okay, but actually everything seems so real. How are we really meant to think and perceive things in this way, as an illusion and a dream? Because well, I'm here. I'm real. I seem real. My partner seems real. My children seem real. My house, my environment, my society—it all seems real. So how can I perceive it in this other way as just like an illusion? So indeed, this kind of concrete perception, well, this is what we mean by delusion, right? Delusion or confusion. That is the hallmark or the nature of samsara. We might perceive things as solid and real, but that doesn't mean they really are. Buddha realized the lack of reality of all things, the emptiness of all things, and established that with reasoning. Modern scientists have managed to do the same thing about material phenomena. By deconstructing and investigating phenomena, they've come to see that in spite of appearances, phenomena lack reality. Nothing is truly established. So these days it's important that all of us, the lay practitioners included, have some understanding of the reasoning and the logic behind these points of Dhamma, right? In the past, it was different. The average person was not formally educated or not highly educated. They had strong faith, strong belief, and so it was enough just to say, this is how it is. This is how Guru Rinpoche is like this. Practice like this. Cultivate your faith, and it was enough for people to follow that route with steadfast faith. But these days it's different, right? People are more educated, and so we can't avoid explaining at least a little the logic, the reasoning behind statements like all phenomena lack reality, all phenomena are like illusions and dreams. So it's really important that we all apply ourselves and gain at least some understanding of what's meant by these profound statements, these crucial points. Just as His Holiness the Dalai Lama is advocating these days, all lay practitioners should also apply themselves to the study of the major treatises, the major scriptures like Nagarjuna's root stands of the Middle Way and the other Madhyamaka scriptures. And in each household or each village, let's say, if there can be at least a few people who have a proficient understanding of these profound scriptures and are actually able to discuss, to explain them, that should be the aim. So indeed, it's really important incredibly important that we come to understand these points. And as I've said, the most accessible way to understand is to cultivate the understanding that all phenomena, everything you see and experience, is nothing other than a dream, an illusion. That's kind of the relative approach, the relative way to practice this excellent main pathway of reference point. This is the illusory like samadhi. And again, this is the most accessible way for sort of lay practitioners or more simple practitioners to apply the second excellence. Now let's move on to the third excellence, the excellent conclusion of dedication. Dedication, the word dedication has two connotations or two aspects to it: parinata and dana. Parinata, so these are Sanskrit words. Parinata means to transform, transform through dedication all merit into to transform all merit through dedication into a cause of enlightenment. So how do we dedicate merit, or how do we dedicate virtue? We dedicate it thinking, may this be a cause for the enlightenment of all mother sentient beings. Through this virtue, may all beings without exception attain ultimate lasting happiness, namely the state of perfect Buddhahood. So you use the virtue that you have, the virtue you've cultivated, to a certain end, right? Like if you have 1,000 rupees, well, it's not really useful just to have 1,000 rupees in your hand. You need to actually put it to use, right? Okay, you're going to use it to buy food or clothes or transport or what have you, right? So you dedicate that 1,000 rupees to a certain end, right? So it's the same when we speak of dedicating in practice, in spiritual practice. We're dedicating our virtue to a spiritual end. We're directing it to perfect enlightenment for all beings. And dedication really is very powerful. Actually, it's also possible to make perverse dedications or negative dedications, as we see in Tibetan history. There are many stories of people who have made perverse dedications, and as a result, they can be both as spirits or ghosts, very malicious beings. And we have the previous Tibetan king Langdama, who, through the force of previous negative dedications, caused enormous damage to the Buddha Dharma, almost wiped the Buddha Dharma out in Tibet. So when you accumulate a lot of virtue, you're accumulating a lot of potential power. And if you dedicate that then not to enlightenment or a beneficial end, but if you dedicate it in a negative way, well, that power of that virtue can actually lead to a lot of destruction. So if we dedicate our virtue correctly, if we dedicate to enlightenment, another benefit of that is that through the strength of dedication, the virtue will continue to increase. So it's not going to be just like a seed which just sprouts once, right, and then is over. It's going to continue to reap fruit again and again and again. Like there's a plantain tree, right? A plantain tree is said to ripen just once. So you get just one harvest of fruit from a plantain tree. But then there are trees like apple trees, which ripen year after year, right? They bear fruit year after year. So for generations, some trees, like up in Humla, we have trees that have been bearing fruit for several generations. So when we dedicate our merit to perfect enlightenment for the benefit of others, it becomes this inexhaustible source of virtue, inexhaustible source of benefit. So it becomes virtue in accord with liberation, namely virtue that is going to lead to liberation. So when we perform a virtuous deed infused with bodhicitta, it becomes virtue in line with liberation, a virtue that will lead to liberation. If we then further strengthen that virtue with the excellent main pathway of reference point, that virtue becomes immune to destruction by adversity. And then when we dedicate to enlightenment, it becomes inexhaustible and is sealed in the sense that it will continue to increase and gather strength until we attain perfect enlightenment. So let's recap. Whatever we do, we need to do it with the three excellences. We need to be motivated by the excellent preparation of bodhicitta. Then the action itself needs to be infused with the understanding that everything is just an illusion and a dream. This is the excellent main part free of reference point. And finally, when we've completed the action, whatever it is, we need to dedicate all the merit we have created by dedicating. We need to dedicate all the merit we've created to perfect enlightenment for the benefit of others. In that way, we seal that merit, that virtue, with the excellent conclusion of dedication. So please keep these crucial points in mind. And this is indeed, it's the threefold, the three excellences that are basically the subject matter of this entire instruction manual of Kyabje Jujun Rinpoche. From beginning to end, actually, everything Kyabje Jujun Rinpoche is teaching us is a teaching on the three excellences. The same goes with the words of my perfect teacher, Patrul Rinpoche's precious text. That entire treatise is basically a treatise on the three excellences, how to cultivate and apply those three excellences. There's nothing more important than this point, than these points. Okay, so now let's return to the text and continue with the text itself. Excuse me, the text itself. So we're on page 125, the English translation. Results of negative actions. These can be divided into three. So, the results of these negative actions can be divided into three: the fully ripened effect, the effect similar to the cause, and the environmental effect. So, for instance, the fully ripened effect would be, for instance, if you kill someone and then as a result are born in hell, that's the fully ripened effect. The effect similar to the cause, or in the case of killing, then as a result, in your next life, you will have a short life, and so on. So your karma will affect you in that way. And then we have the environmental effect. So in the case of killing, then that karma will ripen in your future lives, in your external environment. So could we be born in a place like Israel, Gaza, Ukraine, and so on, basically a place engulfed in conflict, where your life is in danger, endangered by war, by conflict, by aggression. So these are instances of actions similar to the cause, or ripening similar to the cause. So in short, karma ripens in a variety of ways. That was just illustrating different types of karmic ripening, using killing as an example, but the same applies to all the various actions, to the non-virtues of killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, and so on, and so forth. So as the text says, the fully ripened effect, the relative gravity of negative actions depends on specific factors such as their motivation, object, time, and frequency. So the intensity of their motivation, whether it be virtue or non-virtue, the intensity of the strength of our motivation makes an enormous difference to the strength of the karma we're accumulating. Likewise, object. So in the case of killing, or any of the non-virtues, the object of the other person or being that is the object of your action, that makes it a difference. Likewise, time. For instance, we have 4 great anniversaries of Buddha's enlightened deeds throughout the year, and on those days, the effect of actions, positive and negative, are multiplied more than 100,000 times. So that would be one example of time making a difference. And frequency, of course, performing one action once will bring about different results to performing the action multiple times. Thus, the worst negative actions result in rebirth in the hells, the less serious ones result in rebirth as a hungry spirit, and the least serious lead to rebirth as an animal, with the respective experiences of suffering described in the previous chapter. The Close Mindfulness Sutra states, the fully ripened effect of the least serious negative actions is rebirth among animals, that of more serious ones is rebirth among the hungry spirits, that of the worst ones is rebirth in the hells. So, the fully ripened effect sorry. So the least serious negative actions result in rebirth. Among animals, more serious negative acts as rebirth as hungry spirits, and the most grave of negative acts is rebirth in the hell. So this is one angle of karmic ripening. To go into this in detail, and there is an enormous amount of detail found in the scriptures, but in Buddhist teachings about karma and karmic ripening, then we need to look at the Abhidharma teachings. I think Rinpoche said various sutras, of course, and the also commentary on the Treasure of Precious Qualities. That's a very extensive explanation there of karma. So these and other scriptures will give us even more detail. Now the effect similar to the cause. So experience is similar to the cause. This is another way that karma can ripen. Taking life, for instance, results in one's having a short life. As a result of stealing, one will be short of possessions. Sexual misconduct results in one's having numerous enemies. From lying, one will often be criticized and belittled and so on. As a result of sowing discord, one will quarrel with one's companions because of one's harsh speech. Everything one hears will be unpleasant. So someone once, recently as I met someone overseas who said, "Oh, I never find good friends. I never find good friends." Well, that's a karmic ripening, isn't it? As it says here, as a result of sowing discord, in the future you will quarrel with your companions. You will not enjoy harmonious relationships. Because of one's harsh speech, everything one hears will be unpleasant. Some people really do experience this, right? They never hear good news. They're always just stumbling across bad news, unpleasant conversation, disturbing conversation. That's also their karma, right? On account of worthless chatter, meaning just gossip, just meaningless talk, like me, just talking endlessly, never closing my mouth. Then one's words will lack authority. As a result of covetousness, one's wishes will never be accomplished. Some people struggle with this, right? They never get what they want, things never go to plan for them. So this is karmic ripening of covetousness or of envy. Harmful intentions will result in one's always being afraid, fearful, ill at ease. Wrong views will result in one's being stupid and confused. But this is stated in the Jewel Garland as follows. So, of course, Rinpoche read this, giving the transmission, but I'll just skip to next page, 126. So the quotation on page 126 finishes, "From holding wrong views, you'll meet wrong views." And now actions similar to the cause. So if we jump back to this quotation from the Jewel Garland, as it says, "From telling lies, you'll be much criticized. By sowing discord, you'll be parted from your friends. Speak harshly, and you'll hear unpleasant things," and so on. So there's a lot to say about these, but if we go through, as I said before, if we go through every line of the wealth of quotations that Kyachit Rinpoche brought into this instruction manual, we just will not go through the text in time. So actions similar to the cause. This is a third aspect of karmic ripening. Having performed certain actions in past lives, one subsequently takes birth as a being who enjoys and indulges in those deeds, as explained in the 100 parables on actions and so on. So we see this both with positive and negative karma, right? Some children, from a young age, without anyone telling them to or influencing them, take joy in, say, killing bugs or something like that. Right? That's a karmic habit, you could say. And on the flip side, some other children will automatically take delight in the Dharma without any kind of external influence, right? So this is a karmic ripening that is similar to the cause. So there's a very relevant story we can tell here about karmic ripening, how the effect of our karma ripens in our next life, in our future lives, our rebirths. So there was a kind of a bandit in the past in Tibet who attacked many lamas, many practitioners, tulgus, and so on, even tying them up, stabbing them, kind of almost torturing them, handcuffing them, and then chaining their hands above their head and so on. And so I think she said, and then that person, he was reborn blind from birth and so on. Anyway, Khenpo Daza Rinpoche would teach this story and many other stories illustrating the result of karma. So going back to this story of this bandit, just in brief, this bandit lived at the same time as Mingyur Namkhe Dorje, this extraordinary master who, really had the power to transform an eon into a second into an eon, and so on. This kind of adept lama. Anyway, this bandit, he supplicated, beseeched Mingyur Namkhe Dorje to help him, to protect him from his the burden of his sins. And through Namkyo Mingyur Dorje's intervention, then it's said that the bandit, he did have to be reborn in hell. There was no way out of that because of the terrible negative karma he'd accumulated. But it was reduced to just a second, like it said, or just like the time it takes to bounce a ball and have it, return to your hand. That was the period of time the bandit was reborn in hell. Actually, it's a really moving story, the story of this bandit. We just don't have time to tell it in detail, but this is one of the many stories that Khenpo Daza Rinpoche would tell us. So the story goes, this bandit, he went to see Mingyur Namkhe Dorje to get his help, and he apparently assaulted Mingyur Namkhe Dorje, grabbed him by the scruff of the neck, held him down, and said, "You have to promise to save me from hell. I'm gonna, on your life, you have to promise to save me from hell." Mingyur Namkhe Dorje said, "Okay, I'll see what I can do," and he was able to intervene and reduce the bandit's time in hell, and help him attain a human rebirth. So his next rebirth was a human rebirth. But Mingyur Namkhe Dorje was very clear. He said, yes, I was able to intervene and delay his karmic ripening, but there's no way for him to avoid it. So he has attained a human life now, but in the future he will have to undergo the karmic ripening of his sins. There's no way around it. So he will return to hell at some point in the future, Mingyur Namkhe Dorje said. So Mingyur Namkhe Dorje then actually went into retreat for 7 days to practice on behalf of this bandit, and so that he could influence where he's reborn in his next life. And at the end of the 7 days, then it said, so Mingyur Namkhe Dorje was one of the lamas at Dzogchen Monastery, and this at the end of the 7 days, kind of dust storm rose up at Dzogchen, bringing all of this dust, a kind of tornado of dust, like a black wind, and kind of spiraled around, gathered, engulfed the whole, filled the air with dust, and then just disappeared like that. And Mingyur Namkhe Dorje, I think Rinpoche said he went outside at the time, and anyway, he said that was actually that dust storm was the coming of the bandit's spirit, can we say, or consciousness. And Mingyur Namkhe Dorje said, well, as a result of the practice I did for him, he's been able to attain a very kind of lowly human rebirth. But in the future, he will have to go to hell. There's no way around it. So there are really moving stories that really affect the mind to illustrate all of these different types of karmic ripening, actually. So the environmental effect, this is the effect that ripens one's environment. It includes the following effects. As a result of having having taken live grain will be less nourishing, medicines less effective, and so on. As a result of one's having stolen the harvest will fail. Sexual misconduct will result in a clammy environment, thick with dust, mist, and rain. From lying, one will end up in filthy, foul-smelling surroundings. So in Nepal, we can think of just a few years back how filthy Kathmandu was. No proper sewage system, rubbish collection, or anything. It's much better now, of course, but that's karmic ripening, right? So, as it says here, from lying, one will end up in filthy, foul-smelling surroundings, like the surroundings many of us lived in for many years here in Kathmandu. As a result of sowing discord, the country around one will be a barren wilderness broken up by ravines. So, up in Humla and the surrounding areas, those valleys are filled with ravines. They're so craggy, full of cliffs and bare rock mountain faces. It's not uncommon to hear of people having accidents and actually falling to their deaths in the ravines. As a consequence of harsh words, the plains will be arid, thorny, and infertile. Worthless chattel will result in the four seasons being disrupted. As a result of covetousness, grain will be meager and of poor quality. Harmful intent will lead to delicious, nourishing food becoming bitter and unnourishing. So there's some words here that are I think the word here that's translated as infertile. I think that's it. Which in the Tibetan reads like salty. So maybe that, we should say maybe that means, in short, infertile soil. And anyway, there's a word here that I don't fully understand. She says, when you don't understand something, it's okay, you can just be honest about it and say I don't understand. We're not Manjushri, right? We don't have unpeded knowledge. We're not omniscient. So you know what you know. You don't know what you don't know. That's okay. No need to pretend we know things we don't know. So as the text continues, worthless chatter will result in the four seasons being disrupted: spring, summer, autumn, winter. For instance, it being cold in the summer and warm in the winter. Unseasonal weather. As a result of covetousness, grain will be meager and of poor quality. Poor harvests, meager harvests. And these days we see this, right? People are saying the harvest these days because people are overusing fertilizer and insecticides and so on. Then this is affecting the quality of the harvest, so that even though you have a lot of grains and product, it's not, that food is not nutritious. It's actually not nourishing. So we're seeing this karmic ripening in our own lives and in the world at present. So as Guru Rinpoche prophesied, in the degenerate age, the external environment, the earth, water, and so on will degenerate. Harvest will start to fail and so on. And in the press, like Sampalundrup, we find supplications to Guru Rinpoche for telling these difficulties of the degenerate time and requesting Guru Rinpoche's protection. On account of wrong views, grain will be scarce and completely unattainable. The effects similar to the cause and the environmental effect occur unpredictably, either in the same life or in subsequent lives. So now we've covered the three aspects of karmic ripening, negative actions. And now we move on to the next subsection, reflecting on positive actions to be accomplished. So, positive actions to be accomplished. So what this is saying is that positive actions are that which we need to accomplish or cultivate. Negative actions, on the other hand, are what we need to abandon and avoid. positive actions refer in general to antidotes, which are inconceivable in number, the 84,000 teachings and so on, which were given as remedies to the 84,000 afflictions or 84,000 mental states, but they can be summarized very roughly as consciously rejecting the 10 negative actions described above. So the 84,000 afflictions are types of negative karma, negativity, affliction, and to antidote those negative afflictions, Buddha taught 84,000 teachings. As it says, they can be summarized roughly as consciously rejecting the 10 negative actions described above, and then acting out that decision to reject them by physically and verbally turning away from them. So the 10 negative actions, the 3 of body, 4 of speech, 3 of mind, to consciously abandon them, to make the decision, I am not going to perform those actions again. So making the conscious decision to abandon them from now on, to avoid them from now on, and then to follow through, to implement that decision with one's body and speech. So to physically avoid the 3 physical non-virtuous actions, and to avoid with one's speech the 4 non-virtuous types of speech. So first of all, we need to generate the resolve. As it says here, the conscious rejection of the 10 negative actions, right? We need to generate that resolve, that mental resolve, and then we need to follow that through with body and speech. When we talk about karma, we can also make a twofold distinction of mental karma and, say, the karma of intention and the karma of enactment. So your state of mind, the intentions you have, even if they're not followed through with physical acts or with speech, still accumulate karma, right? There are therefore 10 such actions determined by what they accomplish and how they are accomplished. So the 10 positive actions are the opposites of or remedies to the 10 non-virtuous actions. The 3 positive physical acts are to protect beings' lives, to give generously without attachment, and to observe pure conduct. So protect beings' lives, to cease hunting, for instance. We've managed over the years to stop hunting in Homla and Limi and surrounding areas. It was a bit of a struggle, in short, but now pretty much everyone has consciously given up hunting, is committed to that, and also helps implement the ban in the area by removing any snares and traps and so on that are left by hunters, creating basically a sanctuary for wild animals. So the 4 verbal positive acts are to tell truth, to reconcile parties in disagreement, to speak gently and good-naturedly, and to talk about others' good qualities. So this is so important. You get people who are always talking negatively, just always stirring up shit, basically, criticizing others. Whoever it is, whatever it is, they find something negative to say. Even if they say it in a kind of a seemingly flattering way. So anyone who comes to see me, please don't speak like this. It happens too often. People come along and they talk and talk, and everything they say is just poison. But what we say and how we perceive things is a reflection of our own mind, right? If you're always seeing negativity and you're always seeing faults in others, well, that is a reflection of your own faults. What we see is our perception is like a mirror, right? A reflection of our own faults or our own qualities. So we should keep that in mind, and we should guard our tongue. There are others who are just very like almost childish in the way they speak. Whatever pops into their mind, immediately they talk about it. Uh, they don't think before they speak. And so these people are very transparent. You spend a few minutes in their company, and immediately you'll know very clearly what they're interested in, what their values are, and so on. If they're really interested in just women, they'll be talking about women. If it's business and money, it'll be business and money, and so on and so forth. So it's not to say that we should not talk, that we have to just abstain from speaking at all. Of course, we need to talk, converse, communicate with one another, but we should think before we speak, right? And we should think mindfully, thoughtfully, and we should speak in a considered way, right? A meaningful way. In short, we should not speak motivated by attachment and aversion. We really need to be careful about this. All of us. So I get a lot of people coming to see me, of course, and it's very bothersome when it's just one person after the other with nothing positive to say, just negative, just criticism. Of course, sometimes we need to be honest, right? If there's a problem, then we need to talk about it, call a spade a spade, but we need to be mindful with our speech. The three mental positive acts are to be satisfied with what one has, to think lovingly of others, and to have confidence in the law of cause and effect. The Buddha himself spoke of 10 positive actions, as we find in the Middle Sutra of Transcendent Wisdom. I too have abandoned the taking of life, and so on. And in the Jewel Garland we read, not to take life, to avoid stealing, and so on. These comprise the tenfold path of positive action. As well as these, there are 10 positive actions determined in relation to the training and the precepts. Distinguishing the middle from extremes, describes them thus: copying the scriptures, making offerings, charity, listening, reading, memorizing, teaching, reciting, reflecting, and meditating. These 10 activities yield boundless stores of merit. These are taught in the Prajnaparamita and the Ornament of Clear Realization, Maitreya's treatise. It's a common method for applying all these to oneself. There are 10 transcendent perfections, generosity, and so on. Generosity, discipline, patience, diligence, and so on, up to prajna, wisdom. And then we have skillful means, power, aspiration, and primordial wisdom, making 10 perfections, 10 paramitas. You should be eager to perform these positive actions, never disdain even the most insignificant of them. Kemadasa Rinpoche used to say. The practitioner practicing Dhamma. So a practitioner should practice Dhamma like a rich person gathering wealth. Such a precious instruction, precious piece of advice. So this might not apply to like modern people's way of accumulating wealth, but okay, more traditional way that actually still applies up to people in Humla and so on, living a more traditional way of life. Well, how do you accumulate wealth? Well, everything counts, right? Everything from valuable livestock all the way down to, say, your kitchenware and needle and thread. Because in like traditional environments, these things were not easy to get, a needle, you can just walk down to the department store or the corner store and buy a needle and thread, right? So everything was treasured. So a wealthy person, for them, their livestock, their most valuable assets, were as important, in a sense, as tiny things like needle and thread. So, for instance, I saw this when I was living in Kham with my teachers. Then, when a family was preparing for their son or daughter to be married, well, they would prepare literally for, say, 5 years. That was standard because they were preparing the dowry, all of their assets, right, their provisions. And all of that preparation had to be done by hand, right? So the clothes, the jewelry, the bedding, and so on and so forth. it took a long time and a lot of effort to gather all of those things. To gather materials, to buy them, usually by trading products, and then to stitch everything together. It took years, not like just like these days where, okay, so your daughter's getting married, so you go down to the department store with your credit card or whatever and buy everything you need for her new life in one afternoon. So this is this. Anyway, I say all of this in relation to Kemo Dazorim's precious instruction, precious piece of advice to practitioners. Practice Dharma like a wealthy person gathering wealth. This means you need to pay attention to everything from, so-called big Dharma deeds like staying on retreat and formally studying the scriptures, all the way down to a single prostration, a single butter lamp offering a single stick of incense, making some prostrations, and so on. You need to pay attention to everything, big and small, across the board, and accumulate merit or train yourself in that way. So, you should be eager to perform these positive actions and so on. In this respect, what do we mean by rejecting the 10 negative actions consciously? It entails recognizing the fault in doing them and thus never ever feeling any desire to perform them. So we need to keep in mind the karmic ripening of these negative actions, what will happen to us in the future, what we will experience if we take life, if we steal, if we engage in sexual misconduct, if we lie, and so on and so forth. Where is that going to take us? And with a vivid awareness of the karmic result of negative actions, then we need to avoid them, consciously avoid them. You can keep in mind also that not just the karmic results, but the results, of being caught out in society. I mean, most of these actions, most of the 10 negative actions, the physical and verbal ones anyway, are actually illegal in most countries, right? So if you perform these actions and are caught, then you will be imprisoned for months, years, maybe your entire life, right? So many of these non-negative actions are actually part of the fiber of modern society, or rather, banning them is the ban on them is part of the fiber of modern society. But Buddha, more than 2,500 years ago, already recognized their harmful nature and outlawed them. So that just shows that Buddhist teachings on the 10 non-virtues and so on, are actually just they are basic facts. They are in line with reality, right? These are, by nature, these actions are harmful. So Buddhist teachings they're rooted in reality. As the text continues, as for physically and verbally turning away from them, this is not only a question of never committing the 10 negative actions generally. It may happen that as far as your present circumstances are concerned, you have a lot to gain from doing them without any effort involved. Nevertheless, you should remind yourself that you have consciously rejected them and thus been incapable of undertaking such actions. So for us, it's not just society's laws and fear of punishment that will keep us from performing these harmful actions, but a vivid awareness of the karmic repercussions that we will have to experience in future lives. There's a very beautiful anecdote about the creation of the Indian Constitution. The main man put together the Indian Constitution was called Ambedkar. My pronunciation is okay. Anyway, the BBC once came to interview him, and they asked him, where did you get your inspiration from? What did you root your Indian Constitution in? And I guess they were hoping that he was going to point to some Western source or Western reference, like British Constitution or US Constitution. But what did he say? He said, my inspiration or my main reference was Buddha's own teachings, the teachings of Buddha Shakyamuni, who outlawed the 10 non-virtuous actions. So the Indian Constitution actually was built upon or based upon Buddha's these fundamental teachings of Buddha Shakyamuni, and likewise the Nepal Constitution. So in the past, one of our Dharma friends, village man, the father of Atsetop. He was a practitioner, but not really a dedicated practitioner, and he got involved in politics. Came to me for advice one day and said, well, do you think I should go for this or not? Actually, I reckon if I told him not to go for it, he wouldn't listen. He seemed pretty set on getting involved in politics. He said, please give me some advice. And I said, okay, best is actually not to get involved in the first place. It's just a worldly pursuit. It doesn't, lead to much. Better to devote yourself to the Dharma. But if you really do want to do this, and if you do this, then heed karmic cause and effect. Remember the repercussions of negative actions, and act honestly, decently, and that will bring you success. That will keep you on the right path and bring you success. The teaching on karmic cause and effect is a fundamental tenet of Buddha's teaching. As I said, it's in total accord with reality. These actions that are being prohibited by Buddha Shakyamuni, the 10 non-virtuous deeds, are by nature harmful for us, for others, for society, in this life and the next. And this was the value of this teaching was recognized by Ambedkar, the man who put together the Indian Constitution and so on. So whoever we are, practitioner, renunciant, layperson, whoever, we need to keep the teachings on karmic cause and effect close to our heart, and we need to live our lives accordingly. We need to consciously avoid, as the text has said, the 10 non-virtuous actions and all non-virtuous actions, and we need to consciously, actively engage in and cultivate the 10 virtuous deeds: generosity, discipline, patience, and so on and so forth, in whatever way we can. So those who are wealthy well, they should use that wealth in a positive direction, right? To support the Dharma, to cultivate merit, to bring benefit to others, benefit to society. That's a wonderful thing. It's important that we have wealthy people in society, patrons and benefactors, right? If money is used well, it really can bring about benefit, and you can accumulate a lot of merit and dedicate that merit to awakening to the Dharma. So continuing on page 128, in avoiding the 7 physical and verbal negative acts, you must have both these 2 aspects. Avoiding the 3 mental acts simply entails giving them up mentally. So that's as Mipa Rinpoche says, well, to paraphrase the lines Rinpoche is quoting, to be a decent human being is the foundation of Dharma practice. So to be a decent human being means someone who is honest, who avoids harmful actions, who is considerate, right? A decent human being. This is really important. Kimodaza Rinpoche would quote these lines and emphasize the importance of this, the importance of being a decent person, of being a person of good, upstanding character. Being a decent person is the basic requirement for success as a practitioner. Likewise, in the mundane world, right? Whichever path you take, you need to be a decent person if you want to have any kind of success, any kind of fulfillment. To think of negative actions as wrong constitutes the decision to avoid them. The knowledge that they're wrong is undiluted, relative knowledge. It's the antidote to them and the essence of discipline. So much to say actually about each of these words. These rich lines of instruction from Kyabje Dushin Rinpoche If our decision to avoid negative actions is very powerful, even if sleepiness, dullness, distraction, and so forth intervene, we'll recognize the circumstances in which we could perform negative activities and will thus be prevented from doing them. So we see this how positive motivation and the way we spend our day, our waking life, affects our dreams, right? Because the state of mind and the physical and verbal actions we perform, they kind of self-perpetuate, right? So if you spend your day meditating on Guru Rinpoche, chanting the Vajraguru mantra, then there are many people who take this as their practice, and they tell of how they kind of continue in their practice all through the night. In their dreams, they're doing exactly the same thing, meditating on Guru Rinpoche, reciting the Vajraguru mantra, and so on. So reading through the text on page 128. This happens through the force of the seed, that is, the power of our former decisions to avoid negative actions. Thus, the 10 positive actions include that seed, the decision to avoid the 10 negative actions. To sum up, not only should you make the decision to avoid negative actions, but you should also wholeheartedly practice all kinds of physical and verbal actions that have a virtuous motivation. And she read to the end of the paragraph. So now we dedicate the merit and take a break.